around, they have tolerated them. Everyone with his own ideas on how to tackle this, why more money keeps being pumped into the hands of the terrorists. Like what they did in Katsina State, where Katsina State government released 75 terrorists plus 300 million naira, so that the terrorists would then release 1,000 captives, Nigerians in their custody, like in their captivity. So they made that arrangement in Katsina State. Those terrorists were released. The efforts put into arresting them, included by the military or the police who arrested them. So all that effort comes to naught, like nothing. Because the moment the politician says, oh yeah, their own way of dealing with this is that, yeah, for those who have died, have died. So for peace to reign, we need to let these terrorists go, plus money. And then the military, again, as compromised as they have become, they will begin to get ready again to go after these terrorists and the multiplier effect. So they will begin to go after them. So when they capture these terrorists, not even thinking about this military who have become victims in the hands of these terrorists themselves, slaughtered, killed like animal, including a senior military officer who was killed, and the whole country just felt like it's okay. Yeah, okay. Is it bad? People were asking, okay, is that bad? Is it very bad? Why is the life of one man so important than the rest? Like, I seem to say they care about the rest as well. They don't. See that community ghost town you saw there? There are thousands like that spread across northern part of Nigeria. Baba. The terrorists don't go into cities. They go into the fringes. Do you know what I mean? They go into all these border communities that you can sense and see abject poverty, underdevelopment. So like palpable sort of like poverty. No road infrastructure, no other dependable infrastructure that you can say, oh, if in terms of emergency, this will aid the response time. No. So they target all these smaller communities, some of them big enough to be like towns, but they know they are somehow they've been cut off from the rest of this. So those of you who came from all these smaller towns, villages and all that, right? When you start hearing the news that you can't go back there anymore, because you know what? There's no one there. The issue of this terrorism and stuff, people say these things in a passive way, many ways, right? I mean, this Boko Haram thing affected my community. And a lot of people have left the community because it's not safe anymore. Thousands like that. Did you know that even though they pretend that it's all right, like over 70% of schools in northern Nigeria have been shut down, and there is no, there is no national emergency about it. The terrorists have shut down, or they have forced the hands of government to shut down more than 70% schools. I'm talking about tens of thousands of schools have been shut down for years. For years. It is not just that the economic state of the northern part of Nigeria, and of course, as a whole, Nigeria, these guys have destroyed. They have destroyed lives of the supposed future generation Nigerians. So while you're busy, especially from the southern Nigeria, in a way that you probably haven't become victims of any of this yet. So if you are thinking that you are building your own future, your children and the rest of them, you do have no idea the future, or sorry, the other children that are going to exist in that future that you are building for your own children, as long as Nigeria remains. These guys are destroying lives, and their criminal politicians are more interested in power. Yeah. So that's why it is believed that the supposed person who is the president of your country right now that could have used the chance to say, you know what, this rubbish has to end. I do not have any form of affiliation with all this nonsense, okay? A country cannot be run like this. So we need to end this. He's not doing that. He is a tired old guy, a relic. Do you get me? So they are more interested in what they can get or take for themselves. And I think the American sees it that way too. Let's go back to that Congress hearing, because there's more.
The first step in denying a genocide is to question whether it's a genocide. And the first way to do that is to question and minimize the statistics. You will hear often, and this is what the Nigeria's foreign minister says, that there are no more Christians than Muslims that have been killed by terrorists. It's a lie. The truth is that over 60,000 Christians have been murdered by Boko Haram and Fulani jihadists since 2009. And the highest estimate of moderate Muslims killed in that time is 10,000. Now, there have been many other Muslims, especially killed by Boko Haram, before that. Moderate Muslims are also the enemy of Boko Haram. But Fulani jihadists have really concentrated on Christians. And they target Christian villages and schools, but they leave Muslim villages and schools untouched. The second way to deny a genocide is to attack the motivations of the truth tellers. You dismiss the charges as products of election year politics in America or of anti-Islamic Christians for Africa. Listen, I've lived in Africa for at least 10 years. That is a racist argument, because what I know is Africans are among the best Christians in the world if you know Africans. And they're also among the best Muslims in the world if you know Muslims. And I have lived in both Muslim and Christian countries. Fifth, you rationalize the deaths as a result of Nigerian history. You say the conflict between the Fulanis and other ethnic groups in Nigeria dates back over 2 centuries to the Sokoto Caliphate of Osman Dan Fodio in the early 19th century. So the Fulani Jihad is really just a continuation that you must expect. It was the Fulani who forcibly converted the Hausa and other northern Nigerians to Islam. And it was only really stopped by the British colonialism and Christian missionaries. Well, Boko Haram and Fulani basically are saying that this was colonialism, and they are simply carrying out a decolonization process. Excuse me. Get my shaky hands to work. I'll be 80 this summer.
Amen.
Sorry. So that argument says these are age-old tribal conflicts between cattle herders and farmers, and so there's really not much you can do about them. The sixth way to deny genocide is to blame out-of-control forces for committing the killings. You claim that the killings are by bandits or undefined terrorists. Claim that their motivation is to profit from ransoms paid by families of kidnapped victims. Deny that there is any religious aspect to the genocide of Christians. This shifting of blame denies responsibility for the complicity of the Nigerian government. The success of the tactic is demonstrated in the absence of any UN Security Council resolutions or Human Rights Council resolutions condemning this genocide. The Nigerian government blames the killings on bandits and terrorists. Doesn't ever define religion or any of the other characteristics that show this is in fact a genocide. And UN and academic spokespeople blame these killings on bandits and terrorists and even demand that the Nigerian government disarm the terrorists and bring their leaders to justice when in fact the Fulani jihadists obtain their weapons from corrupt Nigerian generals. Not one major Fulani or Boko Haram leader has been arrested or tried. Seventh, you avoid antagonizing the Nigerian government because after all, we have to get along with the Nigerian government. And this is a real politic argument, and it's very typical of diplomats, by the way. I was a diplomat, so I know. You don't want to make an enemy of governments that you're really dependent on working with. So don't upset this new president, President Tinubu, and we want to get along with him. Meanwhile, the displacement of Christians from central and northern Nigeria proceeds. Genocidal massacres, kidnapping from schools, and rapes continue weekly. And this argument, which diplomats love, ignores the fact that genocidists are serial killers. Policies toward
genociders are serial killers. The Nigerian government and their supporters wanted us to believe that that this is the clashes between herders and farmers. But historically, you heard him, he's an American congressman. He just said it there like the steps to denying the genocide by bringing about this false historic stuff. Oh, it's always been like that for years. There have always been clashes. That is not genocide. Well, Oyebo self know that about Uthman Dan Fodio 2 centuries ago, the man that led the first terrorism against the people who showed him love. See, history mad gone. I need to kind of remind you, okay? History is crazy. You didn't write it. So therefore, you cannot tweak it to suit your own agenda. The truth is the truth. Usman Dan Fodio is not from any part of where you call northern Nigeria today. Nobody knows where he comes from. His history said when he first got to the Hausa land, he was welcomed as a trader. And what was he selling? He was selling rings, voodoo. And he is also an Islamic teacher. So he started staying back to teach people how to read Quran. He was welcomed. He was actually loved from the history. The Hausa rulers then invited him into their homes. They asked him to teach their children how to recite the Quran. He didn't bring Islam to northern part of Nigeria. No. Islam has been in what you can call today's part of Nigeria way before Uthman Dan Fodio was even born. Uthman Dan Fodio idea of Islam is that those who are practicing Islam in that Hausa land back then, they were also practicing what you call the traditional religion. Therefore, they were not true Muslims. Uthman Dan Fodio incited the children of the elite, the children of the poor who passed through his own tutelage to stage a jihad. The jihad was an act of terrorism to cleanse the land from the people that invited him to their homes. True story. Go and Google it. See, local. Except by the way, you are a Fulani that feels, you don't need to feel bad. You didn't do it. Now your forefathers. You just need to drop the mentality that Nigeria, which is today Nigeria, okay, is the estate of your forefathers. It is not. Your forefathers managed to conquer Hausa land by killing them, right? Killing their leaders, making himself the caliph of a caliphate. Appointed his own son to be the first sultan of Sokoto. He tried to conquer them in Borno Kanemi. He was defeated. He tried to conquer the place you call the North Central of Nigeria today. He was killed. He didn't win any land anywhere. He used treasury to deceive the people who hosted him, loved him. And that is the history of the Sokoto Caliphate of today. True story. Then you can say the British, the colonialists, also helped them to actually last this long. So you get me now? So the only thing is that this generation of the terrorists, the imported ones, the local ones, their elite who are sponsoring this madness, believes that maybe they could still push on. They enter the southern Kaduna, slaughtered thousands of Christians there. Indeed, they entered the Benue, slaughtered thousands of Christians there. They entered Plateau, same thing. And they are at the national level. Their criminal leaders are pushing legislation on how to give them the waterways of Nigeria. They were trying to make laws that would then give the federal government of Nigeria the legal control of all the water. They are already in control of the waterways, but that's not enough. So they wanted 10 miles. That's about 14, 15 kilometers of land from every bank of water or river or ocean in southern part of Nigeria. So all the lands 10 miles from the bank of the water eh, will become owned by the federal government of Nigeria. And the plan to resettle these murderers next to waters, the waterways of Nigeria. That didn't really succeed, before the Bukwari died. So the American knows that this idea of denying it, downplaying it, telling you that other people are also being killed and all of that stuff, right? Eh? They are the signs that Nigerian government have no real plan to crush these criminals. So this is the second phase of them asking the American government, Donald Trump's government, to go to the next stage, just for your information. But let him finish.
Policies toward them based on fear lead only to appeasement and further genocide. The eighth way to deny a genocide is to deny it in favor of current economic interests. We depend on Nigeria for oil, and Europe depends even more on Nigeria for oil. So the oil companies certainly oppose an arms embargo on Nigerian government, and Nigeria is a source of oil for both American and European countries. So here we are, a major supplier of arms to the Nigerian government. The UK also is a supplier of arms, and it is also one of the key owners of parts of the Nigerian oil fields. Then the ninth version, by the way, these 12 tactics of genocide you can see on our website because they apply to every genocide I've ever seen. Sudan and Darfur and so forth. It's been used by other countries as well. The ninth tactic is to claim that the victims are really receiving good treatment, that they also are, being cared for in Nigerian IDP camps and so forth. Well, unfortunately, that is not true because, unfortunately, these IDP camps are very unsafe. The 10th way, and I'm a lawyer, so this is the one that really hits me, is to deny that what's going on fits the definition of genocide. This is what I call definitionalism. It's very common among lawyers and policymakers and journalists. They want to avoid any implication that this genocide is happening because, after all, is it really a genocide? Amnesty International won't call it that, and nor will the UN Secretary General or the European Union. So here are some of the problems with it. First of all, there's a common misconception that a finding of genocide would legally require action to suppress it. Unfortunately, the Genocide Convention doesn't demand that. It was what kept us from realizing it was a genocide for 3 months during the beginning of the Rwandan genocide. I was in the State Department then, and denial was just rampant. They refused to call it a genocide for over 3 months. That's well known now. That's part of it. They thought they'd have to act if they had called it that. But there's no legal compulsion to act. Secondly, in the denial, you have this misconception that genocide always means all or none. In other words, that only genocides of the whole, where you're trying to kill everybody in a group, qualify as genocides. But that is not true. The Genocide Convention itself says the genocide is the intentional destruction in whole or in part of a national, ethnic, racial, or religious group as such. In other words, in part is enough for it to be a genocide, and that's what's happening in Nigeria. And in fact, one of the types of genocide is what we call genocide by attrition, where, in other words, the genocide isn't instantaneous. It happens over time. And in fact, that's what's happening in Nigeria. Helen Fine, a really great theorist about genocide, says it is the most common type of genocide. We also have a problem with this word, genocide, because it has, ever since Milosevic, been replaced many places by the term ethnic cleansing, which was, it was